Good afternoon, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started with the chapter leadership panel. Thank you for participating and joining this chapter leadership panel. Briefly, I want to talk about what we're going to focus on and the way we're going to focus on it. So this chapter leadership panel is directed primarily towards law school chapters to help those law school chapters learn how to proceed throughout the year and become better leaders and make their chapters more involved and get their members more involved. And so we're going to approach this sort of from a chronological approach, covering topics from the beginning when you become an officer all the way up until you have elections and we have officer transitions. So this will, like I said, this will be sort of a chronological viewpoint of how your year should go as a chapter officer or as a chapter member who is looking to contribute to your chapter. We will have save some time for questions at the end of the session. I'll be bouncing back and forth between Huva to see if anyone put any questions there. You're welcome to put them in the chat here as well, and we will address all the questions that we possibly have time for, and we should have time for plenty. Before we get into the crux of the matter and start talking about the topics and our experiences, I wanted to introduce the 4 panelists of this chapter leadership panel. And I told them to toot their own horn, to give me their P.A.D bios. It's not to sound egotistical or anything, but it's to let you all know as attendees why these people are qualified and what their experiences are and why you should listen to them. So to jump right in, our first panelist is Brother Joshua Aaron Hughes. Brother Hughes was initiated into the Watson Jr. chapter of Phi Alpha Delta at the Lincoln Memorial University Duncan School of Law. He served as the marshal and later on as the justice during his time there. Under Josh's leadership, the Watson Jr. chapter was given the Meet or Beat Award for recruiting the most members in the chapter's history. It obtained merit status twice. It received a 3rd place award for Outstanding Professional Program, a 1st place award for Outstanding Community Service Program, and it was recognized as the 2nd place Stanley Cone Outstanding Law School Chapter. Josh personally received the Jack Miller Award for Top 3 Outstanding Law School Chapter Marshals and the Alex A. Hotchkiss Award for Top 3 Outstanding Law School Chapter Justices. Josh is currently the Marshal for the Knoxville Alumni Chapter, as well as a lifetime member. And we thank Josh for being here. Our second panelist is Sister Michelle Meloche. Sister Meloche was initiated into the J. Sullivan chapter of Phi Alpha Delta at the St. Louis University School of Law. She served as both the clerk and the justice of her chapter, and she received the Frank E. Gray Award for Top 3 Outstanding Law School Chapter Clerks and the Alex A. Hotchkiss Award for Top 3 Outstanding Law School Chapter Justices. She also received her chapter's Innovation Award. She has written an article on fitness and innovation for The Reporter, which is the official publication of Phi Alpha Delta. And Michelle is currently a member of the St. Louis Alumni Chapter and the Alaska Statewide Alumni Chapter, and she is an active member of the P.A.D Health Initiative, the P.A.D Health Law Group, and GLAM Chapter. So thank you for agreeing to be on this panel, Sister Meloche. We'll move on. Our third panelist is Sister Jennifer Sariol. Sister Sariol was initiated into the Dooley chapter at the Northern Illinois University College of Law. She served as the justice of her chapter, and under her leadership, Dooley chapter received the 2nd place award for Most Improved Chapter. Dooley chapter was also recognized by the DeKalb, Illinois chapter of Toys for Tots for its outstanding support and community service. Additionally, Jennifer personally was awarded the Anthony DeGrazia Scholarship from the West Suburban Alumni Chapter, and we are lucky to have her as well. Finally, but certainly not least, our 4th panelist is Brother Jaquon E. Irby. Brother Irby first became a member of the Phi Alpha Delta Pre-Law Chapter at the University of South Carolina, where he served as the Public Relations Chair and Interim Secretary. He was then initiated into the Lamar Chapter at the University of Mississippi School of Law. While there, Brother Irby served as the justice of his chapter. He was instrumental in revamping the chapter's membership and presence on campus. Under his leadership, Lamar chapter was given the 3rd place award for Outstanding Social Program. Jaquon currently serves as the District Justice for District 25, which covers North and South Carolina. So please join me in welcoming the four panelists. Briefly, I will introduce myself, and I will pay $1 to the foundation since I haven't done that. I'm Ronald Coleman, Sanford Chapter, Knoxville Alumni Chapter, District 15 Justice. I was initiated into the McReynolds Chapter of Phi Alpha Delta at the University of Tennessee College of Law and later elected Marshal. During my service as Marshal, I helped to facilitate the chapter's name change and was subsequently elected the first Justice of the Edward Terry Sanford Chapter. I've received the Jack Miller Award for Top 3 Outstanding Law School Chapter Clerks and the Alex A. Hotchkiss Award for Top 3 Outstanding Law School Chapter Justices. During my tenure, Sanford Chapter won several programming awards and was recognized as the second place Stanley Cohn Outstanding Law School Chapter Justice. I'm currently a lifetime member, as well as a member of the Knoxville, Nashville, and Kentucky statewide alumni chapters, and I am currently serving as the District 15 Justice, which covers Tennessee, Kentucky, and the southern half of Ohio. So with that, I believe we've introduced the panelists. I've tooted my own horn a little bit, and let's get on to why you're all here, about why you should, or how to be better leaders and how to help your chapter go into greatness this coming year. The first topic that we're going to go over is yearly calendars and preparing for the upcoming year. And first and foremost, I need to let you all know, in case you haven't checked, there are some minimum requirements for programming that your chapter must do in order to receive chapter merit status. These are the minimum requirements, and they are 2 professional programs each semester, 2 social programs each semester, 2 recruitment programs each semester, 2 academic programs each semester, one convention fundraiser per semester, 1 community service program per semester, 1 initiation ceremony per semester, and 1 alumni networking program per semester. That seems like a whole lot. That's, if my math is correct, that's 12 events in 1 semester, and it seems crazy. But I'm going to call on some people to tell you why it's not a crazy, insane amount of programs that you have to do. First and foremost, Brother Hughes, Josh, can you talk to us about planning yearly calendars and planning for the upcoming year?
Sure. Joshua Hughes, Knoxville Alumni Chapter, former of the Watson Jr. Chapter, lifetime member. So basically, overview, kind of like what Ron said, you have the list of what has to be done. First thing I did, in my chapter did, when we were doing our calendars, is we'd look at those requirements, and we'd start being like, okay, what's some kind of programs that can meet, an academic program, or a social program, a networking program. We throw out those ideals, and then once we had those, we kind of just picked arbitrary dates around other school functions, plugged them in, double checked it. And one of the great things is that every event you host can actually be more than one. So you can do an academic event and a social event, or an academic event with a networking event, with a professionalism event. Theoretically, you can create an event that covers every category. So that's what we would start out with. Kind of at the beginning of the year, brainstorm what's a good ideal. We'd also look at previous year's calendars. If it's not broke, don't fix it, kind of thing. If it was successful, we try to replicate it. If it wasn't successful, try something new. And I believe that's it for me, Ron.
Thanks, Josh. Jennifer, you are coming off of a year where you were serving as Justice. Could you please talk to us about how you planned your calendar for the year that you were serving as Justice?
Yes. Hi, Jennifer Sariol, Dooley Chapter. So what we normally do is we get elected in the spring, and the outgoing board meets with the new incoming board. So my board met with the old board, and we looked at the calendar of the requirements that we have to set up. We would go over the events that we had the previous years, just like Josh was saying, like what isn't broken, what worked. And while we were looking at those events, we also looked to see what they fit and what could we add to make them fit another category. So if we had a social event, could we raise funds to donate to a community event, and like try to make it fit multiple ones. If it couldn't, we move on and try to add other events that would fit for that. And we would do that for the fall calendar and just try to come up with events. While we met with the old board, we also looked at events that we might have necessarily had in the following event, so that when we met together for the spring calendar, we already had some ideas going into it, and it wasn't just like going into like the pool like empty-handed. We also try to ask our members too. We would send out an email like saying, hey, if you guys have any ideas for the incoming years of things that you thought that we should have done or things that you think would have been impressive to do, send us an email, and we would try to incorporate those ideas into the calendar as well, because then we use those events to add them to committees later on, and that's what we would do.
Thanks, Jennifer. I think that's really good advice from both Josh and Jennifer. Just to reiterate, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Look at your past calendars and use what you can. And again, what Josh and Jennifer were emphasizing is that one event can actually constitute multiple different types of programs. So take use of that, so you don't have to put on 12 events per semester. You can get away with 3, 4, 5, and that will be enough to get all 12 of the required program types, because each program will be more than one program type. So we've talked about your establishing your yearly calendars, preparing and planning for how your year was going to go. But in addition to that, you have to be able to work with your executive board and the other members who are in your chapter. And so we're going to talk about collaborative and cohesive executive boards. And I'd like to first call on Sister Meloche to talk about her experience with working with her executive board.
Hi, everyone. Michelle Meloche, J. Sullivan Chapter former Justice, former Clerk, St. Louis Alumni Chapter Reactivation, and Alaska Statewide Alumni Chapter as well. I think the biggest things, I kind of made a couple like bullet points that I thought were the most important when it came to a collaborative and cohesive executive board. First of all, definitely accountability. It's not just the justice's job or the marshal's job to make sure that like their specific things happen in the chapter, but it's also everyone, all chapter officers and leadership to hold each other accountable and to make sure that everyone is taking responsibility and making sure that everyone is participating. And with that, honest communication is honestly, I think, one of the most important things, making sure that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So we're doing twice as much listening to each other, to the chapter, to make sure that communication is open and people feel that they're able to be, they're able to speak freely and that they're listened to. And then in addition to that, especially for leadership, humility is really important. So being able to understand that it's okay if maybe an officer has something happen in their life and they have to step down because they aren't able to meet the requirements of that position. Instead of making it personal or making it a fight, having those open and honest conversations, once again, going back to honest communication, just saying, hey, we noticed that you're really busy, or this thing came up and we haven't gotten the things done that we need to get done. Are you able to stay in this position right now? Or is this something that maybe we can spread out some of your responsibility? Or do you think maybe this year isn't a good year for you to be serving on the leadership committee and having a sustainable succession plan? So that's kind of the last thing. Making an action plan for that worst case scenario of someone needing to step down, knowing what that looks like. So it's not just a horrible thing, because life happens. This year is a great example. I have an immunocompromised person in my family, so it really changed the way that I had to go about progressing in school and who I could be around. So life happens, and being prepared for those things is kind of the best way to do it, I think. Out.
Thanks, Michelle. That's some really good advice. I'm next going to call on Josh with Hughes to tell us about his experience working with his executive board and dealing with them.
Thanks, Ron. So to piggyback a lot off of what Michelle was talking about earlier. You stereotypical lawyers, we have that A-type personality, which means, let's be honest, you're going to clash at some point. Personally, I had an executive board who a few members clashed. How you handle it is you basically be like, look, there's going to be people in the legal profession that you're not going to agree with, but being an attorney, being in this profession, there's some level of candor, some level of respect that you have to have towards your colleagues. So you want to be an attorney, start acting like an attorney, have that. At the end of the day, you're trying to do what's best for the fraternity, your chapters, your classmates, your school, the community as a whole. So just find a way to work it out. You don't have to like each other. Just be nice to each other. Be professional. Be courteous. And most people are hopefully adult enough to understand that, so you don't have any problems. And what Michelle said, be prepared for the unexpected. I had a marshal when I was justice that had to resign. He bit off more than he could chew. Couldn't devote the time that the position needed, realized it, was like, hey, I can't do this. So he resigned, and luckily we had a contingency in place. We followed that contingency, so it was kind of a smooth transition about halfway through the year. So, over? Is that what we're saying now? Over?
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, just to echo what Josh was saying, when you're in law school, you're preparing to be an attorney, and you need to learn how to act like it. As a criminal attorney working for the state, there are times that I have some very heated briefs with defense counsel, and we get into it and argue the law. But at the end of the day, we're still colleagues, and we have to learn to respect each other. And I think it's even more important when you're talking about Phi Alpha Delta, because just as the ritual whenever we're closing our meeting says, elsewhere they may breed deep enmities, but not so with us. One experience that I had that I'd like to share is when I was justice, I had a vice justice and a clerk who were at each other's throat. They just did not agree with anything that the other person said. You could not get them to agree on anything. They wanted the chapter to go in different directions with different programs. They basically just hated each other, but they were both good officers. And so I kind of did what Michelle and what Josh were saying is you make sure that they're fraternal to each other, show respect. And if they're interested in different topics, your chapter can go more than one direction. If one officer or one member wants to do philanthropic events and the other wants to do more professional or academic events, that's great. That both gets them out of each other's hair and lets your chapter go on two different courses at the same time. So give them the reins. Just make sure they act fraternal to each other. But if they're really at each other's throats, then you separate them and let them go after their own interests, I think. So hopefully that will help with your experience with your executive boards, and hopefully your executive boards are just the best of friends and you never have anything and you're able to collaborate and work cohesively. That is certainly my hope, but at least now you have a little bit of advice in case that doesn't go exactly the way that you planned. The next thing we're going to talk about is definitely going to be a tricky issue, especially given the times that we're in. And we're going to talk about recruitment ideas and how to pitch the benefits of P.A.D. And we are going to skew it specifically towards virtual recruitment because that's just something that most schools are going to have to deal with now. And so I'm going to first call on Brother Jaquon to talk about how he recruited and any ideas that he has for when we go virtual.
Hi, Jaquon Irby, Lamar Chapter, Low Country Alumni Chapter, District 25 Justice. So as a caveat of like pinpoint information, when I took over as justice of my chapter, the chapter was inactive for about 7 years. So I was starting everything pretty much afresh. Typically, before coronavirus, we've all known about tabling, participating in school-wide events, asking to speak in classrooms, and also having like dropping by different social events and talking about the organization. However, everything like that will have to be done virtually now. Some ideas that's really big, push social media, having social media accounts and making sure that somebody manages those. I know in my undergrad pre-law chapter, there was a designated person to handle social media, and communicating that way as far as different events and different information about the organization. Something else that we did kind of have, each of us kind of had our own elevator pitch of why we like the fraternity and what the fraternity can, how the fraternity can benefit others. And then actually, once you get to know the people that you're trying to recruit, you can kind of tailor it to things that you know that they're interested in, like tailoring to 1Ls. We have a network. We've created an outline bank. So things such as that. So really push social media. Something else that I would do, any type of online Zoom web conferences. One, you can host your own, or two, if you know that the school is hosting one, maybe ask the dean of students or whoever's running the Zoom or WebEx to, hey, can I have like 3 or 5 minutes just to speak about the organization? So that's one thing. And also mailings. If the school sent out any mail, maybe create a little flyer and stick it in with the mail that goes out to incoming students and all students, especially in the age of the coronavirus. And the last thing that I want to hit on is maybe, and we've done this before at the Lamar chapter, reaching out to students individually, especially the 1Ls. You definitely want to make, and even transfer students, definitely want to make them feel welcome to, one, the organization, and two, the school. So each year I would ask the school for a list of all the incoming students and all the transfer students, and personally will email them. And what we did was the executive board, we would break it up. So maybe each person maybe had 10 to 12 people to email, congratulating them on coming to law school, welcoming them to the university, as well as telling them a bit about Phi Alpha Delta. Turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Jaquon. I think those are some really outstanding ideas, and I hope you all take those to heart, because especially in these times, those are some really creative ideas that will be very helpful. I think Jennifer also has some experience with this. Again, I think they kind of went virtual while you were still serving as justice, so you've already got some recruitment ideas. Tell us about them.
Yeah, we went virtual mid-spring year, so we had to kind of adjust to that because we were still doing recruitment in spring. So we do the same thing. We tailor it to 1Ls, 2Ls, 3Ls, because they're each going to have their own concerns and what they're looking to get out of the fraternity. With 3Ls, we emphasize that we get a discount through TMIS for your bar prep. We also emphasize alumni and the networks that you have and you create. We actually got an idea from District Justice Holly Van Christian, where she told us, ask your students, where do you want to practice and what area of law you want to practice, and pull up your networking in the website, because it has all the P.A.D members and where they are, and show them, this is how many alumni are in that area that you would be accessible to, just you have something in common now. For 2Ls, we did a very close one-on-one, because I'm a 2L, so it's easier for me to know what 2Ls are friends with what other 2Ls. So especially if they were in P.A.D, I would go to them and be like, hey, how come your friend isn't in P.A.D and you are? That's kind of weird. And just kind of doing that, because it's easier for me because I was already in their grade versus me telling a 3L, hey, why aren't you, they won't listen. So you have to tailor it to who you're talking to. I do think one-on-one is really the most effective way for each grade, no matter what. But I think that also what you're telling them while you're talking to them one-on-one should matter, because they each have different concerns for it. With the 1Ls, a lot of them they want to socialize with each other and they want to get to build a brotherly bond. And what better way to build a brotherly bond than joining a fraternity together? We were really lucky that our school does a student org fair, so we were able to talk to a lot of 1Ls. But we also do a a meeting, just us and the 1Ls, and we call it the survival skills. And we talk to them. We're like, listen, we're here to help you. Even if you don't want to join, we want to consider ourselves leaders in the school, and we want to help you no matter what. We would love for you to join us because we want you to be like us, but here's some survival skills that helped us our 1L year. And just basically being like, hey, even if you don't join, we're here for you, but we'd rather you did. And just giving them those skills. And most of the time, anyone that went to our survival skills ends up joining because they see it's not just about like, hey, we want you to be in our club. No, we actually want you to be a part of our family. So doing that, and like I can't emphasize enough, one-on-one contact, like following up. Once you have these 1L meetings, you get their emails and you email them individually. Like, hey, it was nice meeting you. This is who I am. If you ever need to talk about anything, that's what I'm here for. And then seeing them in the hallways, wave hello. Like a simple waved hello like does a lot of things. I've had several 1Ls be like, I didn't even know people knew who I was until you waved hello. And that made me want to be a part of your group because you guys talked to me like I was a person and not just another number. So that's what a lot of what we did. So over.
Thanks, Jennifer. And I'd really like to reemphasize that one-on-one thing. I think if I asked any of you in this meeting right now, what's the main reason you joined P.A.D? The answer is somebody asked me to. And so, that's the easiest thing that you can do. Just go up to someone and ask them if they want to join P.A.D. And like Jennifer said, focus on the things that they're interested in. I think we've got one more person who has some experience with this. Well, we all have experience, but I wanted to call on Sister Meloche to also talk about this. So, Michelle, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Brother Ron. J. Sullivan Chapter, St. Louis Alumni Chapter, Alaska Statewide Alumni Chapter. So I know that we talked about recruitment ideas, but also the benefits of Phi Alpha Delta as a whole. So our chapter went through a lot of fluctuation we had some years where we'd have a ton of people join and then some years where it would just completely fizzle out. So our goal as a board, and we had a lot of the same officers going in from when I was a clerk into justice. So that made it a little easier because we got to kind of see everything that didn't work coming in and then found a way to try to address some of those things. So we kind of had a return to the roots of what Phi Alpha Delta is and why it's important. So really knowing the Phi Alpha Delta values and being able to find a connection, once again, one-on-one with people and finding out what's important to them and then finding a way to translate that into, well, Phi Alpha Delta does this also. So for an example, our school, it was a Jesuit school, so St. Louis University, and so a lot of people went to SLU because they find service and philanthropy really important. So that was something that we pushed a lot, is the mission of service to the student, the school, the community, and the profession. So especially during these trying times, I feel like talking about service might be really helpful. And we'll have to be a little creative about how that service looks in a virtual setting, but really focusing on service to the school and the students. I really liked how Jennifer said, even if they're not Phi Alpha Delta members, being a fraternal leader and example, I think really helps people want to join Phi Alpha Delta, because if they think, okay, well, anytime I meet a P.A.D member, they're really nice and really friendly, so maybe I want to spend more time with them. And eventually you get them. We had a couple 3Ls join from my class because they saw us all the time doing cool things for the school. And we didn't say, only Phi Alpha Delta members are allowed for a lot of those programming, like, survival skills or something like that for 1Ls. Also, as a first generation law student, that's something that's very important for me. I not only had no one in my family who was an attorney, but I didn't really have any connections with any lawyers. Even in undergrad, I thought I was going to be a doctor. So having a built network already in place sounded really exciting to me. Finding out that there were over 300,000 members all over the world who would automatically be fraternal, offer advice, and really do whatever they could to help was something very comforting to me. So I know that I made that one of my personal missions, to reach out to people who maybe don't have that network and support system at home, or just through people that they knew coming into law school. And going on with that, another way we marketed was SBA is awesome. A lot of our orgs that are at law schools are great, but Phi Alpha Delta follows you after graduation. So once you join, you're a Phi Alpha Delta member for life. And so it's really cool that the more you get involved when you're in a law school, the more people you're going to meet who you'll have connections with afterwards. Whereas I know I was involved with SBA as well, but I don't really stay in contact with a lot of the people that I worked with. in that setting. So really focusing on all of the things that Phi Alpha Delta has to offer, not only in law school, but I mean, like Jennifer was saying as well, people in practice groups, and maybe 3 years down the road, you want to try a different type of law. You can meet people in Phi Alpha Delta who can offer advice there. And that is over.
Thanks, Michelle. Real quick, I put it in the chat, but I wanted to plug the executive office. A lot of these are people, we've talked to you about our ideas and how you can personally go, but you've got a great resource in the executive office, and they have an online site that will help you with ideas for virtual recruiting. And they can also work with you to ship out recruitment materials such as pamphlets and flyers, like Jaquon was saying, to stick in a mail that's going out. So definitely make use of the executive office. They're there to help you. They're fantastic, so use them. We're going to move on now to programming ideas. And really what I'm going to do is have each of the panelists tell us about their favorite program while they were in law school. And then I hope that you like these and that you can shamelessly steal them for your own chapter, and even if you have to modify. That's the whole point of P.A.D, is that you need to, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and shamelessly steal from other chapters when they have successful programs, if it works for your chapter. So first I'm going to call on Brother Josh to tell us about his favorite program.
Thanks, Ron. So my favorite program in law school, it was called Wheels for Warriors. So what we did is, anybody that was a veteran or a widow of someone who was a veteran, we would offer them free wills, simple trusts, and we advertised it all over East Tennessee. They call ahead, make appointments. One of the reasons why it was my favorite is, one, my school required you have to have so many hours of pro bono service, so we got pro bono service for that. However, it was very hands-on and applicable. So like the 1Ls, we would let them do like the intake sheets. Then the 2Ls and 3Ls, we would actually have attorneys come in from the community, and the students would draft the wills, and the attorneys would give them kind of a template, but they would be like, okay, you need to change this or that. So it was a great way to serve our community, to give back to people who've given so much for us. But it's also a learning experience. It's a great networking experience because we got to meet local attorneys. And afterwards, we'd all go have dinner together. So that was my favorite program.
Thanks, Josh. Jennifer, tell us about your favorite program.
Yeah, my favorite is we do an end of the semester holiday party, because our school, SBA, does a big end of the year party, but not a big end of the semester party, and it's a good socialization of everyone. But we don't just limit it to P.A.D members. We do it to the whole school. And we have, leading up to the week, we do Toys for Tots drive. So if you bring in a toy, you get an extra entry on a raffle that we do for a prize. So that way we're still serving the community. And then we also do a ornament painting competition because law students are very competitive, I found out. And then we have the teachers judge it so that it's not just the students participating, but we get the professors involved as well. And then we invite the alumni in because we have donuts and hot chocolate and stuff, so that it's still a networking event for the students themselves. And then while we're still doing that, we also do an outline drive for the incoming semester coming in, where if you bring another outline, you'll also get put into the raffle that we do. And the prizes that we give are usually gift cards to community places around the area. So small businesses and stuff around the DeKalb area that we all know, but it still benefits the community around us too. Yeah.
Wow, that is a very involved program, but it seems like a lot of different people will get benefits out of it. And going back to the program requirements, I think that ticks off about as many as you can get in a single program. So next is me. I'm going to talk about my favorite programs, and I'm going to cheat and talk about two, but be as short and sweet as I can. The first of my favorite programs is what's called Immunity Week. And right around Thanksgiving or the week before Thanksgiving, when you're really, you're wanting to get ready for finals, but you still got to go to class and you're still going to get cold called. We worked with our professors and did this thing called Immunity Week. And for the whole week, if you would donate $1 to charity, or if you would bring a can that would be donated to, a food harvest bank or, something like that, you were immune from being cold called that day from that professor. And so you would have to bring the can, and at the end of the class, you would put your can or put your dollar in a collection in that classroom, and then you'd have to bring another can for the next class. And the first year we did that, I think we got approximately 600 cans. The second year, once people heard about it, we ended up transferring over 800 pounds of food, and I think we raised about $200 to it. So it's a real simple thing. All you got to do is talk to some professors and get them to agree to it, especially like the 1Ls, and it's a great idea. The second one is what's called the judge's reception, and there's a couple different tweaks you can do. One is you can just make it a PAD only thing. That's an extra benefit, and it establishes the networking. But regardless, you call in a local judge, a criminal court judge, a circuit court judge, magistrate judge, anybody that's in your area. You ask them if they'd be willing to speak. And so then, like I said, you can have it just a PAD-only event where they come to a dinner, the person speaks for 30 minutes, and you're done in an hour, hour and a half. And it's just a way for PAD members to network with them. An alternate option is to actually call it, we've kind of called it the bench and bar previously, and it's to open it up to members of the bar. And the attorneys pay twice the amount that the food would be. So if you're getting, if it's $15 a plate, attorneys pay $30 to show up. And they're essentially covering the cost for your PAD members at your law school to show up. And the attorneys are wanting to go there so that they can schmooze with that judge. So those are two different options, but both years all 3 years that we had it, we had a fantastic turnout. You can make someone an honorary member of PAD, and we actually did that with one of them, and they are an active member of PAD now. So those are two of my ideas. And without further ado, I'm going to call on Michelle to tell us about her favorite program.
Thank you, Brother Ron. So I'm glad that you did that, because shamelessly I could not pick between two of them, so I'm going to quickly try and talk about two as well. The first one was SLU Law's Got Talent. It was open to the whole school. It met requirements for fundraising, service, social, and alumni networking, and we co-sponsored it with multiple organizations. So we have a Sports and Entertainment Law Association, and then we also have SBA with a lot of different committees. So we got SBA to back us as well in this event. And it was really fun. And I think you could also do it virtually. I've been thinking a lot about that. And we basically did a talent call all of first semester, kind of explaining what the event was, that each student would be allowed to pick a charity that they'd be kind of like backing. So kind of like a pageant. And then they would be given 5 minutes to have whatever kind of talent. So we had people do impressions, we had comedy routines, piano, singing, guitar playing. What else did we have? And then I think there was a mime of some sort, but it was really fun because there were a lot of different things. Someone did baking as their talent, but instead of like being on stage, they just said they were going to donate all of the money that they got for that little bake sale. And it was a really great event, really fun. A lot of people came. And then the way that it was a fundraiser is we did basically like cost sharing. So we charged a minimal fee for people to attend, and then half of that amount would be donated and half of it would go to all of the organizations that were involved. And that was really fun. I'd be more than happy to kind of give the list of everything that we had to do to lead up to those events to anyone who's interested in something like that. And then the second one was an honors night that we did last year. And that's kind of where we said at the beginning in my bio that I received the Innovation Award for our chapter. So we found it really important. This one, met the requirements of networking, social, and alumni because we invited a lot of people. It was a nice happy hour 2 or 3 weeks before finals in the spring. And we recognized people in the chapter who were very active, but we tried to focus on giving it to people who didn't have like an actual title in the chapter. So it was any chapter member. We did all of the core values of Phi Alpha Delta as the types of awards. And then we also had the Fraternalism Award. So like compassion, innovation were some of those. It was really not only something that our school really hadn't done. But it was a really cool thing for Phi Alpha Delta only members to go to. And we also had a judge come and honorarily initiated them as well, and had some speakers. And then, so that kind of made it more of a networking event as well, and a professionalism. I don't think I added that, but they talked a little bit about things that they'd like to see from young attorneys and attorneys just entering into the legal field. But I'm more than happy to kind of talk with anyone if they're interested in doing something similar to that, as I'm sure all of the other speakers are as well. Over.
Thanks, Michelle. Again, this was like a great event. And last but certainly not least, Jaquon, tell us about your favorite program while you were at Lamar.
So I'm going to follow up and do two as well. So the program that we actually received the programming award for was actually a mixer with Delta Theta Phi. At my law school, Delta Theta Phi was huge, and we were the new kids on the block. So we tried to work well with them. So we just went out to an oyster bar and called it a mixer. But my favorite event is what we used to do at the end of the semester, of each semester, fall and spring. Our actual faculty advisor would host the chapter at his house for either a Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas dinner, end of the semester dinner, like full-fledged dinner, ham, turkey, macaroni and cheese, all types of different goods. And then I'll talk to y'all a little bit later because the school paid for it. And we would invite like the different deans that's in the law school, different professors in the law school. So it was a way for the students to interact on a more relaxed level with the dean. As well as the different law professors, instead of being shivering in your boots sometimes, scared that you're going to get cold call. So that was one, and we also used that as a recruitment tool. It's like, hey, you get to meet your professors and whatnot on a more social level. But in order to like tie that event into a community service aspect, we also asked the individuals that was coming to the event to either bring money to donate to Salvation Army or bring cans of food to donate to the local food bank. So that's one thing. We're just laughed and talked, but the key thing about that event, before we all started eating and having a good time, we would do toast to what did we enjoy about the past semester or something that we looked forward to within the organization. So I said the executive board definitely used that because we allowed anybody to say whatever they wanted to get feedback from members of what they liked and what they really didn't like, or what they really looked forward to in the upcoming semester. Over.
Thanks, Jaquon. So as you can see, we've all got some favorite events, and I hope that you've latched on to at least one of them, if not all of them, and realize that, that one event will cover, 3 to 6 different program types. And, like I said, shamelessly steal it. I did want to plug something, and I think you put it in the chat, but because, most chapters are going to be virtual this fall, a lot of people are going to be wondering, how do I do a virtual event? And we have a specific breakout session for that tomorrow. Brother Aaron Cunningham is going to be talking about engaging virtual chapter activities. And so if you're interested more on specifically how to do virtual programs in the fall, definitely check out Brother Cunningham's session tomorrow, because I think it will be, he's got that kind of down pat. He's got that niche market, and so he can give a lot more advice on virtual programming. We're going to move on now to talk about budgeting, or excuse me, to talk about committees and how to get chapter members involved. It's great and well when you've got 5 members on your executive board, but hopefully your chapters are greater than 5 members, or if not, hopefully you get them to greater than 5 members, and you want them to be involved too, and you want them, PAD to mean something to them. So Jennifer, can you talk about how you got some of your chapter members involved who weren't officers on your executive board?
Yeah, so like I said, we start off with a big email to all the members, of ideas of events that they might want to see in the upcoming year. So I use that as if we do end up having to set up that event, I very much email that person that came up with the idea and ask them to be in the committee, or ask them hey, you recommended this event and I feel like you know most about it. So they're usually very quick to jump on that event. I also send an email to the members and ask them what community events or charities or anything that they're interested in. So that way, when we have an event that is about that charity, they're more likely to get involved and be a part of a committee. I also always, whenever we have our calendar ready to go out, I send it to the members and let them know, like, hey, is there any event in here that you think is great and that you would want to participate in? I've had a lot of members reach out to me just based off like a name of an event and be like, hey, this sounds interesting. I'm like, well, I'm glad you said that. Why don't you help us? And also with just like, we had an event where we were doing a 5K, and I know some of our members that like are vivid runners, and I just went up to them one-on-one. I was like, hey, like, I'm not a vivid runner. I cry when I run. So do you think you could help us? Because you would know more about this, and I just think you have more experience. And I think just doing one-on-one talks sometimes helps, but just asking your members a lot, you get more of it than you would even realize. But I think you should ask them before you come up with the ideas, because they will give you ideas and events that you didn't even think about having. And once you go off of their ideas, they're more willing to help and get involved, because they're going to join your event just because they're in P.A.D and they find them fun. But if they came up with something, they're going to be more inclined to just volunteer to help out. I know that a big part of why my 1L year, my justice was very like, hey, if you guys think of anything, just go for it. And my 1L year with someone else created an event, like just our 1L year, and he added it to it, and we ran the committee for that. So I wanted to be that person too, because I think that the 1Ls also sometimes don't feel like they get hurt a lot. And I think if you give them the reins on an event, they're more likely to go and have fun with it. Over.
Thanks, Jennifer. I think that's also a great selling point of P.A.D is you can make 1Ls not necessarily officers, but you can make them chairs of a committee right away, and not many other student organizations can do that. Michelle, I think you'd also have some experience on getting your members involved, and specifically getting them involved in philanthropic opportunities. So could you talk about that?
Absolutely. Thank you. So definitely seconding everything that Jennifer said. It's super important to have strong committees with strong chairs. And I feel like the best way to do that, one, is to find people who are interested in those things. So it does help if they have a sense of ownership in that. I think it's also great to find people who are passionate, who will actually do the work, and then reminding them, hey, make sure to put that on your resume. Like, that looks really good when you're applying for that 1L job and you haven't just been doing classes. Like, make sure to prioritize your classes, but you also were involved in something. And not only were you involved, not only did you show up, but you had a part in planning it. But it's also important to have clear objectives. I think like having people run with ideas is really great. I think there can be a committee for every event that you have. But making sure that there is clear objectives for what the committee should be doing. And then also not only the big deadline of the event, but maybe having like check-in periods where the committee will check in with the executive board, because I feel like, at least in my experience, our chapter officers got asked all the questions. And if we weren't in communication regularly with those committees, it felt weird as an officer to say, you know, I don't know that. So it's good to have that open communication once again. Because we had a lot of different events and people who were very passionate about different things, especially while I was justice, it got a little overwhelming to have a lot of committees. So we ended up creating an additional leadership position called our chief of staff. And that chief of staff was basically the communication point for all of the committee people. So I could still do things for the chapter overall and like focusing on operations, as it's kind of the justice's job. And then I had someone else who was much more available, especially to meet one-on-one with the committee chairs. They would talk to her, and then she would get back to me at least once a week with everything that was going on in updates. So then I didn't have to worry about something sitting in my inbox for a really long time, because I feel like we're all flooded by hundreds of emails a day. So it was nice to have that one person who their only job was to make sure everyone's communicating really well. And I know that actually helped her end up getting a special award from our school, because she was so visible. So creating those positions and letting other people shine, I think, is really helpful also. And once again, kind of echoing, making sure that all members feel heard and welcome, especially 1Ls. It is a unique thing that Phi Alpha Delta can do that not all other orgs can. Echoing once again, it's like my favorite phrase of 2 ears and one mouth for a reason, especially in leadership positions, because we are the voice that speaks for the fraternity, but we're representing the fraternity. So making sure that we're voicing what our fraternity wants, not what us personally think or want. And then especially echoing what Brother Ron said about if someone is passionate about something, let them run with it. Because we had some really cool things. We had a pumpkin patch event where people that weren't from St. Louis heard about this big farm that we have where you can go pumpkin picking. And then we were like, that sounds really cool. Could you kind of get that together? And we had a really fun event where people just carpooled down and picked pumpkins. And we had some international students who she was involved with. They'd never been to a pumpkin patch, so that was really cool. And then my last thing, sorry that I made bullet points, and we had monthly chapter meetings also, where we also had newsletters. So if someone couldn't make it, we made them like coffee dates. So we would get there an hour before the first classes, have coffee, and then touch base, hand out newsletters. And then we could also have that touch point where members would know where we were going to be at least once a month, and they could come talk to us. So all of our officers had to be at those. But those can also be virtual, especially in the spring semester, things get crazy. So we would have an hour where all of us would be online, and then people could buzz in with any questions that they had, knowing that we would be available to answer those questions. And that is it for that one. Thank you. Over.
Thanks, Michelle. That was a whole lot of information, but it was all very beneficial that we can definitely learn and use it and put it to good use. We're going to move on now and talk about budgeting and financing. And this is often a difficult thing for a lot of chapters to do, but fortunately we do have some panelists who have experience with this. And first, I would like to call on Brother Jaquon to talk about how he budgeted and how he got financing for his chapter.
Sorry, I was on mute. So I'm going to talk about fundraising first. So one of the big things that we made more money than we typically ever expected, bake sales, but in a virtual world, really can't do a bake sale. But one thing that we really did utilize was the person that was over development and fundraising for the law school itself. So we reached out to that person because like, okay, well, you're raising money for the university. What tips and ideas did you have? So we worked closely with that person as far as coming up with different fundraising ideas, especially with regards to reaching out to alumni that's local in the area. And also, we got a ton of support from staff at the law school and old members of Phi Alpha Delta that were staff at the law school. But the key as far as with fundraising is people want to know where their money is going towards. So oftentimes we'll ask, hey, we want to for example, we want to send 3 people to convention. Would you pay for the registration fee? And people want to know exactly what their funding is going towards. So that's what I would say mostly about fundraising. But as far as budgeting goes, what we did was we had one big budget for the physical school year instead of breaking things up by the semester. And we were just willing to adapt and change as necessary. But as far as additional funding, we got additional funding through the law school itself. I don't know how y'all schools are situated, but I went to the University of Mississippi. So we got funding from the law school budget as well as the main campus University of Mississippi budget. So the key with that was to talk with the dean of students at the law school and submit a funding proposal. We used the Office Depot discount, shameless plug for Office Depot, and created a binder, everything printed out, and presented our budget and what we wanted to request from the school directly. And we also had the alumni support. So Nicole actually spoke with our dean of students to talk about different things that we needed as far as funding goes. And we also reached out to the main campus and went through their process as far as getting funding, because they actually paid for everybody. All the members got a free t-shirt because main campus would pay for t-shirts for everybody. So that's different avenues that you should try to reach out to as far as funding goes. Over.
Thanks, Jaquan. Also, Michelle, you had some experience with fundraising and budgeting, so could you tell us about that?
Yes. So our treasurer received the award for outstanding treasurer, I think because of the budget that he made. So our chapter had never had just an Excel sheet that kind of does the budget for us. So it was a really nice resource for us to have, to where you just have to plug in if someone pays like membership dues or something. We had a very realistic idea of what that budget was. And I feel like that might not be as important to chapters who maybe are lucky enough to have their own account. But I'm really speaking to people who have to go through SBA for their funds for whatever reason. No matter how we market it, our school is very against Phi Alpha Delta having their own bank account. So we have to go through SBA and go through the law school to access any of our funds. And without going into a tangent, that did become kind of a concern because our budget started conflicting with the budget that they said we had, or the numbers they would report would be substantially lower or substantially higher than what we knew we had based on other numbers. So it really helped for us to have that clear report so we could share and say, okay, well, what do you think is going on? So just having that transparency was really helpful. Being organized was really helpful. And it kind of prevented a commingling of funds or anything, just kind of, it prevented a lot of that sketchiness as well. But in addition to that, it allowed us during every monthly chapter meeting to give, and honestly before any meeting we had or event, to give kind of a state of the chapter announcement to our members, so our members knew where we were at on the budget, where those funds came from, and just kind of gave them a quick update. So there's a lot more transparency. And just like was shared previously, people love to know where their money's going. So I think having that not only made people more willing to donate money for a fundraiser, but it made people more confident that we were using the money and it was going back into the chapter. And then also for fundraising, we found it really effective to give half of the funds to a charity and then keep half for the chapter, making sure that that's, we express that and let people know that we were doing that, but saying, hey, we're donating a portion of the profits to this organization. So they felt like they were doing charity, but we were also able to make it worth the chapter's time, and people, you know, if they want to study versus help table, they could. And then just some quick fundraising ideas. One, know that every dollar counts. So even if you do a fundraiser and you make $20, it's $20 you didn't have before, and you'll be surprised how much you could make that stretch. Dollar Tree is like my new favorite place, because if we needed a binder, you can get it for $1, because we actually don't have a lot of Office Depots in the area. Let's see, bake seals, can't do them virtually, but those did help. We had red carnations, which are the fraternity flower, and then candygrams for Valentine's Day. We did finals care packages, which I feel like, I know that they do care packages on Amazon, so we could do that. And then people could, even family members would buy them for us, like especially spouses of Phi Alpha Delta members would be like, can you secretly send them this care package? And that ended up being really cool. Penny wars are always really fun. So like, we're in St. Louis, so Cubs versus Cardinals, Blackhawks versus Blues was always very intense. But I feel like that could be anything. It could be, you could get as creative as you want, like Batman versus Superman or something. We had the opportunity when they were open to like work at stadiums as well. Our school has a really big basketball team. So if you work one of the stands, then they will give you half of the profits of everything they make for that night. It takes a little bit of planning because you have to set it up a year in advance, but it's something that'd be worth looking into to make those connections once everything opens up. And then also 5Ks and those kind of events. Over.
Thanks, Michelle. Those are some really great fundraising ideas. I wanted to echo 2 points before we moved on to the next section, and one was with what Brother Jaquan said. A lot of organizations have difficulty working with their school, and we're going to move on to that very shortly. But the law school often has difficulty giving you funding or making sure you have the right amount of money that you're supposed to have. And one important thing to note is that the general school campus, not the law school, but the actual main school campus, does have a lot of resources that you can use. And a lot of student organizations from the law school don't take advantage of that. They think it's only through the law school. And so if you go to the main campus, there is a high chance that you will get a lot of funding that they just have sitting there for law students that no one else has tapped into because no one knows about it. So definitely check, even if you're having difficulty with your law school, check the main campus. And secondly, Michelle gave some really great ideas for local things that you can do within your chapter as fundraisers. I just want to point out, don't forget the fraternity at large. That is an international fraternity, and the vast amounts of alumni. If you go to the silent auction page right now, you'll see how much money the alumni are willing to just throw at people. If you do a t-shirt sale, if you do a hat sale, if you do pullovers, like anything that you can get that alumni have access to that has the P.A.D letters, especially if it's a clever phrase. I think Vought chapter right now has one that's like talk to the learned hand, or Tisdale chapter is doing one that's like race judicata with like t-shirt with tennis shoes and running. Like those are great turns of phrase. Alumni love it, and they will just throw money at you. So think about that when you're trying to come up with a fundraiser as well. We're going to move on now to working with other chapters, and that can be other chapters right within your neighborhood or chapters that are kind of spread out just in your district in general. And first, I'm going to call on Brother Josh to talk about his experience with working with other chapters.
Thanks, Ron. So when I went to law school, I was very lucky because we had two law schools that are literally 2 to 3 miles apart, the University of Tennessee and then Lincoln Memorial. So we actually had a great relationship with Sanford chapter, who was our sister chapter. And, you know, we would go to district conference and meet each other, exchange contact information, talk to them. And there were several events throughout the year where we would actually co-host events. So we would do a recruiting we did a recruiting thing at a local brewery where, you know, one chapter paid for so much food. The other chapter paid for so much food, whatever. And it was a great way to bring, you know, members of both law schools together and meet. We even did a joint fundraiser. We made P.A.D 3/4 zip pullovers. We put them on, I think it was custom ink. And so we sold a bunch of those. We just split the money 50-50. So it's really nice if you live in a city where, you know, there are multiple law schools, or if there's a close law school. You know, I think Northern Kentucky and Cincinnati, they're 20 minutes apart maybe. So, you know, it's worth coming together because one, these people, after you graduate, they're going to be your colleagues, so it's nice to go ahead and know them. Two, they're great to bounce ideas off of. Three, you have a whole lot better. Your events will be better attended if it's multiple law schools, and so it actually lets your members or prospective members be like, "Wow, this is actually a large organization." Something that I might want to find value in. So it's great if you can do it. If you can't do it, I always if you have an alumni chapter nearby, I highly recommend working with the alumni chapters. They're a huge resource. They will tell you, they'll give you advice. You know, everyone in an alumni chapter has been through law school. Most of them have been officers in law school of Phi Alpha Delta. So, you know, 99% of the time, if you have a problem, with the exception of Corona, because this is just a crazy event, somebody there is going to know or have had something similar come up. So it's a great resource that you should probably use. Over.
Thanks, Josh. Michelle, could you talk about some of your experience working with other chapters?
I absolutely can, but right before I do that, I want to echo, alumni do throw their money at any fundraiser that you post, especially shirt sales, and Brother Ron is actually wonderful about that. I think it's the meme from Futurama where it's like, take my money. I feel like he's posted that on probably like 3 things that I've posted for prior fundraisers. So definitely don't forget to post on the international page. Not only fundraising, but anything that you guys do, we love to see that. Alumni love to see the things that chapters are doing. So please, if you have a cool event, post some pictures, because that is a really cool way for us to kind of get engaged and see what's going on in the chapter. But working with other chapters. So the biggest thing I want to stress is start communication early and with more than one person from the other chapter. Because one, life happens. So once again, talking about the inbox overflowing. If you send that one amazing email, but they also get like 200 other emails at the same time, it would be horrible to lose that opportunity just because one person's email was really full. So I know that Emily in the executive office is amazing about giving emails out of surrounding law school chapters, alumni, and she'll help you get emails so you can contact more than just one person from a chapter, because people get busy, crazy, but in law school, all of us generally have a lot going on. I think social events worked out really well for us. A lot of the schools have sporting teams, so we could get people to drive over and maybe go see a basketball game, or we have the Cardinals and the Blues, so then people would come from other schools, and then we could even have some Phi Alpha Delta members have them stay overnight if they want to sleep on a couch, so they don't have to drive back after the sports game ends really late. So that was really cool, especially for our law schools that maybe are pretty far out from the city. It was cool for them to be able to come into the city, have a fun night, have a safe place to stay without paying for a hotel and then getting to go back home. And then also any type of leadership or networking or professional programming, I think is really cool to open up to other chapters, even just inviting other chapters that might be close to you to those events and trying to give as much notice as possible. I find that like 2 weeks or more is helpful. So planning ahead and being prepared we all know that those are important things, not just in Phi Alpha Delta, but in the legal profession. But that's everything I can think of right now. So over.
Thanks, Michelle. I think we've kind of talked a little bit about what happens or how to work with chapters if they're somewhat close to you, but I did want to emphasize 2 stories about how you can work with chapters that are hundreds of miles apart. The first one is a story that's of District 15, and so every year District 15 has an event that we call Keeneland, and it's at a racetrack in Lexington, Kentucky, and that is kind of the central location for District 15. You've got several chapters up by Cincinnati that can drive 2.5 hours down to Lexington. You've got several chapters in Knoxville that can drive about 2.5 hours up to Lexington, and a lot of other chapters can kind of access it within a reasonable driving distance. And so, like Michelle said, as long as you plan it well in advance and communicate to those chapters, you're going to have some great attendance. A lot of times we don't even go into the racetrack. We just stay outside and tailgate and watch them on the big screen. But that's a way, like we got chapters from Cincinnati and Knoxville and even Memphis, hundreds of miles apart, that you're going to get to come to an event. And especially if you make it an annual event, you can kind of get chapters from all over, and especially all over your district. The second story I wanted to briefly cover is my hated football rivals, those pesky Florida Gators. And if anyone here is from Fletcher chapter, I apologize, but y'all's football team sucks. So what we did is I got in contact, and again to echo Michelle's point, I got in contact with the justice and the vice justice of their chapter, and we started coordinating in the spring. And Florida was coming up to Tennessee to play a football game in the fall, and we coordinated them coming up. They brought about 12 to 15 people. They drove up on a Friday, stayed the night, and we had different P.A.D members who let 1 or 2 of their P.A.D brethren or sisters stay overnight, for 2 nights, and we all went to the football game together and watched it, and then we hung out afterwards and just had a great time, and we showed them around Knoxville. So even if you have someone from all the way down, like Gainesville up to Tennessee, to Knoxville, which was at least a 10 or 12-hour drive, as long as you coordinate it, you can work with other chapters. And so if you have a rival, whether it's football, basketball, dance team, whatever, if you can get in touch with that chapter and plan it far enough in advance, it makes for some really good memories. We will we will move on now to talk about, we've worked with other chapters, we worked within our own chapter, but we're at a law school, and we've already kind of heard some difficulties and frustrations with the SBA and with other student organizations. So let's talk about how you can work with the school and how you can work with your SBA and how you can work with the other student organizations. And I'd like to first have Jennifer talk to us about her experience with that.
So we handle them in both different ways. So with other student orgs, it's really important to find a common ground. So we have the same event, we do it every year. We have a P.A.D member, an alumni P.A.D member that actually was a part of BALSA as well. So every year we have her come in. She's a retired judge. So every year she does like a yearly, like what you'll need once you graduate law school talk with them. And then, so we keep that going every year. But even with other student orgs, if we're doing an event and we think it's important that it relates to another student org, we usually reach out, because at our school, you have a certain amount of funding that the school will give you for events or even for the semester. But if you're doing it with another student org, it gets split between both of you. So both of you are not wasting just your own money and other parts of that. So I believe one of the events we did, it was like a tailgating event for one of our football, and we have a sports and entertainment society. So we reached out to them and we're like, hey, we were thinking of doing this event. We don't know if you're doing an event because we don't want to step on your toes either. But if you are, can we join together and do that? Because I know that that's something that has happened before where other student orgs kind of get mad at each other because they're doing the other person. So I think it's important to reach out to them, and kind of just like when you're reaching out to other chapters, reach out to more than one member in that org. So reach out to the president and the vice president, because we've had moments where the president isn't necessarily as active as you would think that a president in a student org is. And then a vice president might be able to be like, hey, I'm actually handling that. So that's how we handle other student orgs, just trying to find a common ground. And with the SBA, what we do is at the beginning of the year, we always ask them for their rules, like in writing, because we need it in writing because we're future lawyers and we know that if they change them, they should tell you in writing. And that will be your argument when they tell you that you didn't follow the rules. And then we ask them like, hey, like how much money do we get each semester? Does it roll over? Like what we have to do? Because a big issue we had found the years prior was that they expect us to tell them about it 6 weeks in advance. So anytime that you would wait less than 6 weeks to tell them, they wouldn't give you funding. And we realized that a lot of our events, as long as we open them up to the school, they'll usually pay for the event itself. And most of the time, our events were always open to the whole public in general, because we want P.A.D members to interact. And the only times that we didn't invite the whole school is we would make it free for P.A.D members and charge a fee for non-P.A.D members. And the school itself will still pay for those because it's open to everyone in our school. So it's important to get the rules in writing. And then we do a welcome back to school event at our it's like an apple cider farm. I don't know what they're called. I'm from Florida. That's not a thing down there. So I call it that. They make fun of me for that. We found out the SBA was actually going to try to host an event like that too. So we asked them like, hey, we will plan it if you guys want to join us together. So they basically handled talking to all the alumni from our school, not just P.A.D alumni, they reached out to alumni, they recruited everything. We handled talking to the place and doing that. And that itself worked because it ended up being a fundraiser where we raised $300. We didn't even realize that we could do that. But I think looking at the advantages of other student orgs of the people they could reach, or even the things that they might have access to that you don't, is important when you're trying to do that. Over.
Thanks, Jennifer. That's some fantastic advice, especially for when you're kind of dealing with a difficult SBA or difficult student organizations. I think that's very helpful. And I know, Jaquon, you've kind of already touched on it, dealing with the school and the SBA. So could you tell us about your experiences with that?
Okay, so I'll break it up. So dealing with this, so there was funding available from the Dean of Students budget, the SBA's budget, and the university, the whole University of Mississippi budget. We just had to know, nobody ever talks about it and really knows the ins and outs as saying the policies and the rules. You got to definitely stay abreast of that. But as far as dealing with the school itself, we pretty much worked hand in hand with the Dean of Students. And the key thing about the relationship that we had we didn't always go to the dean's office when we needed something. So just dropping by and saying, hey, hello, how you're doing, and creating that open relationship is super, super important, especially before you ask for something, and even try to bounce some ideas off them like, hey, thinking about doing this, so I'll know what to put in my proposal to submit to the dean, which she would take to her body as far as funding and stuff goes. The SBA pretty much wanted to know what we did for the entire semester. So always highball it, and whatever SBA gives you, use it. And even if it's nothing such as, okay, we're watching RBG, which came out while I was in law school. We're watching the RBG, getting popcorn and pizza. Like, if you want to spend a whole bunch of money on popcorn and pizza, please do it. Because generally with SBA, if you don't use it, they'll cut your budget the following semester or the following year. And as far as working with other student organizations, we've worked with BALSA and Delta Theta Phi. And a lot of the members were members of both, well, except Delta Theta Phi. But we worked a lot with BALSA. BALSA members was in Phi Alpha Delta. Phi Alpha Delta members were in BALSA. So we just planned events that way, and always split the budget. So we're able to not pull so much funds from the Phi Alpha Delta account. But I think the key thing, real key thing, is one, as previously mentioned, understanding the policy. Document everything. Document everything. And always have an open line of communication. And when in doubt, find a nearby district justice to come talk to whoever on your behalf to explain what you're trying to do. Over.
Thanks, Jaquon. And I especially want to reiterate that last point. You've got alumni and you've got people in the executive office who deal with this stuff all of the time. And it's super beneficial when you can get an alumni member to come in and kind of start, flipping tables, or when you can get someone from the executive office to who are much nicer, by the way, to send the right message and to ask the right questions and to know who to contact, so that you can open those better lines of communications. And one more point, kind of like just to echo what Jennifer said, there is nothing wrong with smacking your name, P.A.D, on some other program, some other student organization's program. If they want, a little bit extra manpower, or if you have a massive budget and not a lot of members, give them a little bit, pay for half of their stuff and then smack P.A.D on it. And that's a P.A.D program. They're like I said, shamelessly steal all the time. It's probably not the most ethical thing if you're stealing from like your clients, but when it comes to programming, steal from whoever you can. If you got to add your name to it, if you want to, steal from another chapter, do it. And so that's an easy way to work with other student organizations. Or if you're planning one, say, hey, toss us a $20 or $100 and we'll smack your name on our program. It's real simple. But it opens that relationship up with other student organizations. The last thing we're going to talk about before we get to questions is kind of towards the end of the year when we're dealing with officer transitions, and more specifically with ensuring continued greatness. And there's been a recent change such that officer transitions should be a lot easier and a lot more structured because we have now shifted district conferences from the fall to the spring, and they are district leadership and transition conferences. So you will have a district justice. You will be getting together with the old board and the new board and from people from all over your district to go over the officer transitions. But I'd like some people to talk about how you make the next justice or the next, clerk just as good as you or better. And so first I'm going to call on Josh. And can you talk to us about how you ensure that your chapter continues going into greatness?
Thanks, Ron. It's a little different now that you have the leadership and transition in the spring instead of in the fall. But when I was a justice and an officer in law school, what we would do first we actually made a binder, and this binder included almost, if not everything, almost everything you needed to know about Phi Alpha Delta its operations. So it included like the book of the ritual, the policy manual, our bylaws. We had a section in there of, we had list of programs that we've performed, which ones worked, which ones didn't work. So we passed those between boards. And also we would do kind of like a transitional officer transition along with the other local chapter and the alumni chapter. And during that time, we would sit down, we would kind of do a preliminary calendar, come up with what events we'd want to hold, general time frame. We'd go through, make sure we hit all of the requirements that the fraternity wants law school chapters to hit. And, you know, if the incoming officers had any questions, as we were planning, the old board and the new board planned everything together basically. So if they had any questions, the old board was available to answer any of those questions. And another thing is always be open to questions. If you're outgoing, you know, be available to the incoming board for any kind of assistance that they might come up with. They're going to run into something that you might have, you know, came up with yourself, or you might have some ideas to help them. You know, if you're a new officer, don't be afraid to ask the old officers. That's what we're here for. We're a fraternity. No one's going to bite your head off. Don't ever be afraid to ask questions. I know attorneys have this reputation of being unfriendly, unkind. If you ask someone for help, 99% of the time, that person's going to help you. So it's all about preparation. You know, I think before Ron, Nicole would tell us, always pick someone or always help the next person in line be better than you were. And so if you take that to heart, your chapters will be a well-oiled machine and be very successful. Over.
Thanks, Josh. Jennifer, you were very recently did an officer transition. So can you tell us how, not necessarily how you did your officer transition, but how you picked someone who's going to be your replacement, or how you made sure that that replacement was in a good position for the chapter to continue going on?
Yeah, so in my school, it's very common that the 2Ls are the ones that actually run the student organization. Oh my gosh, I saw a puppy. I'm sorry. That the 2Ls are I get distracted easily. Sorry, guys. That the 2Ls are the ones that actually run the organizations, because the 3Ls are still around and can help out throughout the transition period and throughout the year. My chapter also has a binder with everything, but each officer actually has an individual binder that gets handed to them from their previous person. And then they also have something, which I don't know what the other officers do, because every officer keeps it a secret. So like, I know the justice have like a notebook that we write notes in, that we pass it to the next justice so they could see all our previous notes. Like, I have notes from like 3 years ago when someone was like trying to order donuts and figure out who was in. It's weird. But like, I know like the marshals have their own little thing, that like the secret thing that they do to each other. And so like, just kind of like to bond with each other so that they feel more comfortable asking questions. So it makes it easier for like, it's not just like, even you usually know who took over from you because you have had a connection throughout a year, but like that way it's still not awkward for you when you feel like, because I feel sometimes dumb asking questions, but it felt easier for me because I'm like, I saw one of the questions you wrote on that notebook. I know that I can ask you this question. So it was just easier for that transition. And I always make sure that it's one-on-one first, because that way it's easier for you to talk and be like, hey, I don't want to say this out loud in front of other people, but I made this horrible mistake. Please don't do that. Please do not ever do that. And then we do a big group one, where we actually do a big group one, just all of us together before we even do the calendar, to like get to know each other and talk about things that we think could have been done better in the year before. And then we have our big one where we sit down and just do a calendar for the semester and talk about the following semester for that. We all trade phone numbers too, so that even if like I had the new marshal literally reach out to me and be like, I I guess our old Marsha was in the middle of something and she couldn't reach her, but she had my number and I was like, I can totally help you with that. So it's not just having like your counterpart, but also like other officers should also talk to the other officers too, because even if they're not available, you have another officer to back up on and they might be able to have the answer for you. And if they don't, they probably know who else you could ask most of the time. Over.
Thanks, Jennifer. I really like that idea of binders, binders full of women. Binders full of secrets. I really like that idea, and it helps with the bonding. And I like the one-on-one meetings as well. The one thing I'll add on to this is obviously the executive board each year is going to be elected by the chapter membership, and you don't get to pick who your replacement is. But I think it's important to find someone who is passionate about P.A.D and who is being involved, especially if you aren't lucky enough to have someone like Jennifer's position where you can have a mentor who's been in that position before, who's still at law school. So if you're an officer your 3L year, pick someone who is passionate and just kind of groom them into that position. Go ahead and mentoring them even before the election, or especially after the election, since they've been moved up to February, and give them guidance. And you know, like Josh said, you want to pick someone who does a better job than you, and that's how you know you've really done a good job. So we've kind of covered all of the main topics. We've got 30 minutes until the next general session. I promise we will not keep people here that long, but I did want to get to some of the questions. I'm going to go to the Hoover app first, and if I think we've kind of answered it, I'm going to skip over it, but if we haven't, then I'm going to ask. And if you really have any more questions, please include it in the chat. I'll be coming to the chat after I go through the Hoover app. So, but the first question that I noticed on the Hoover app that we haven't kind of covered about fall programming or recruitment is, where'd it go? What are some effective pitches when a chapter is brand new to campus or coming out of a long period of inactivity? And if only we had someone who dealt with like an inactive chapter and helped bring them out of a long period of inactivity. Oh, wait. Brother Irby, would you like to comment on that question?
So some of the pitches that I used was, one, making it personal. As previously mentioned, it's like, hey, Phi Alpha Delta, we have this huge network of over 300,000 alumni. By that time, we also had a list of alumni, so I was able to go to the Excel spreadsheet. Oh, you're from North Carolina. Here's our alumni that's from the Lamar chapter that are now in North Carolina. So being able to make those connections and basically saying what you can offer and why do you enjoy it. So I've even mentioned Office Depot discount. Everybody prints out outlines and whatnot from where I am at Ole Miss. And the printing is like 3 cents a page. The university was charging like 15 cents a page. So the discount pretty much paid for your membership. And also we talked about getting to know and speak with the deans and different law professors, because even as when I was a 1L, I've heard some students like, oh, I never spoke to the dean before. So that was really weird. So we made sure that the dean and other law professors were invited. So they were like, hey, professor, that just cold called on me. I'm cool with you, but we're sharing martinis and whatnot. So that's pretty cool. So I think definitely making it personable and learning the history of your chapter is huge. Because the chapter that I worked to restart, they died in 2011 pretty much, but they've been in existence since 1929, I think. So making sure you go back and learn your chapter history, because one of the professors there went to law school back in the 60s and was a Phi Alpha Delta member. So getting some of his insight, and he showed up to a lot of our events when we first got started, because it was like, oh, it's the esteemed professor that doesn't teach anything anymore, but you still see him around. And he'll show up to our events and speak with different students and what have you. So that's probably the biggest thing, making it personable, one, and two, what can the organization offer that person? is probably the biggest thing as far as reactivating a chapter and recruiting members. And make your friends join. That's one thing that kind of helped me out the most. So I was in a 2L when I first worked to reactivate the chapter. I already had a friend group of like 10, 15 people that I've studied with. Hey, all of us are joining. And just made it mandatory. Okay, you're going to be my friend. You have to join Phi Alpha Delta. So, and my friend group ended up becoming the e-board. So we already worked well if we can study together, go to different places together, we can work together for an organization. We didn't have too many disagreements, but we knew how to get back in love with each other, so to speak, after we fall out. So make your friends join. That's probably a big way to start. Over.
Thanks, Jaquon. I think that does a great job of answering that question. And I'm going to move on to the next one. This is a very brief one that I'll just go ahead and answer. And it's how do we go about initiating or transitioning a pre-law member into our chapter? And so that happens a lot. And when I was justice, I had no clue how that works. But it turns out there is actually a pre-law transfer form on the P.A.D website where if you were a pre-law member, you can transfer your membership to a chapter. And if you're not sure how to find that, all you have to do is email the executive office. Like I said, these people are amazing and help you with everything, and they know how to do it. So the person, either the justice, you as the justice, or you as a current chapter member, or the person who's trying to become a chapter member from the pre-law chapter, can both email the executive office and say, I'm trying to switch over here, and usually they'll just take care of it for you. So it's a very simple thing. Even if you can't find it on the P.A.D website, contact the executive office and they will help you out a lot. Another question. Thanks for whoever asked, why is Ron Coleman so cool? That's a nice ego boost, and I don't have a good answer for you. The flag, message me later on, and I will tell you where I got it. Is there a way for chapters to have pages hosted on the main P.A.D site rather than having to use a third-party site such as Facebook? Sort of, yes. Again, contact the executive office. They have a list of law school chapters and pre-law chapters and alumni chapters, but they have a list of law school chapters, and from there, there are pages that you can click on to get it. And so if you work with the executive office, I'm sure that they can help set something up to where you don't have to have a Facebook page per se, and you can still have a chapter social media presence. I think we're going to go to the chat. I saw one question that's still here on Hoover, but it's also in the chat, and it was asked, what advice would you have for a brand new chapter justice going into their year? I'll answer it, and then if anyone else wants to chip in, please let me know. My biggest advice to a chapter justice, especially if you're looking into getting the Alex A. Hotchkiss Outstanding Law School Chapter Justice Award, is to make your chapter look good. I don't know anyone who's won the Hotchkiss Award that hasn't had their chapter win in the top 3 of the Cone Outstanding Law School chapters. And it's just because, good leadership shows and how your chapter kind of works. And it also works the opposite way. And when your chapter looks really good, you look good as the justice and as other officers. So the biggest points that I would make is, one, come out with a solid plan. Work with your executive board, like we've talked about. Plan your yearly calendar and make sure you get enough events down that cover all the program types. 2, delegate. Don't put it all on your shoulders. Delegate and have your chapter officers, have your committee chairs, have your committee members do a work. Your job is to make sure the chapter continues moving along the direction that the chapter has decided, or that you as an executive board have decided. It's not to make sure every single event is run and to go down and deal with the nitty-gritty minute details. So make sure you delegate, or you're going to get burned out. And you have plenty of other people who want to help out with that. And third, before I call on Michelle, is to post like crazy. Post it on Facebook, post it on Instagram, post it, invite the International Executive Board members. I don't care if we're dealing with, you're in Washington, D.C., or if you're in Washington, D.C., and we've got a executive board member, Brother McKell is in Colorado. He's not going to be able to make it. I don't care. Invite him. The more visible you are, the more recognition you will get. So just do that. And Michelle, what do you want to chip in with this?
So definitely, you touched on the main big thing. Don't do everything yourself. Really make sure that there are other people who are going to help plan events, who are going to go to the events. It's important to be a good leader, but it's also really important to hold people accountable and make sure that they are also doing what they're supposed to be doing in their roles, finding people who are passionate about a certain cause and have them run with that. But my biggest piece of advice is lead by example. So we are a fraternity focusing on fraternalism. If people, when they think of you, they think, oh yeah, that one person, they're in Phi Alpha Delta, they really like it, but they're also really kind. They also smile at me in the hallway. That really makes me feel welcome. So leading by example of what our fraternity stands for, I think, is the best thing you can do as justice.
Excellent point. Yeah, if people don't say that you represent everything that is purple and gold, you're still probably doing it all right, but you're not all the way up there like you could be. Moving on to the next question. Kimberly, you've asked, what advice would you give for keeping students engaged on a Zoom event when it's difficult? I'm going to defer and recommend that you go to Brother Cunningham's event tomorrow, his session. He's going to give a lot more in-depth advice, and he has much more expertise on how to make sure that people stay involved on those virtual programs. So, Kelly, how do you do 2 initiations if no one joins the second semester? I'm going to tell you a dirty little secret. You don't have to have an initiation in the spring. What you have to do is have one planned for and have one scheduled and try and recruit members. But if no one has signed up, you literally can't have an initiation. And we're not going to fault you. And the executive board and the executive office, they aren't going to fault you for doing everything you can to recruit members. And maybe you were just so successful that every single law student joined in the fall. That's not going to come against you. The point is you have to plan for it and you have to be showing that you are trying to recruit members. So once you do that, then if you don't have an actual initiation, it's still scheduled, it's still on your calendar, you should be okay. Scrolling down. Sorry. Yes, go Vols, Nicole. Another question from Kelly, and I think this is important. I have experience with this, but I also want some of the panelists to chip in if they have experience. The question is, how do you fight a bad reputation, both with your school, who puts you on a short leash, and with the student body, who seems scared to join? And so when I joined Sanford chapter, we were kind of the tailgate chapter. We held tailgates every football game. We got drunk a lot, and that was pretty much it. I think the easiest way to address that, and most of the time when you have a chapter that's got a bad reputation, it's because all they do is alcoholic events. And I think we've talked about a whole lot of different programs that that are non-alcohol related. But what I would recommend is to, again, plan early on. Set your calendar for the whole year before the school year even starts, and go to the school, go to the SBA, go to the dean, go to whoever is, giving you trouble at the school, and say, look, this is what we have planned. I recognize that, when I came in here, we had a bad reputation for doing X, Y, and Z. We aren't doing that anymore. That's not who we are. We are rebranding our chapter of Phi Alpha Delta and say, this is what we've got. And then you can do the same thing with the student body. Just go up and ask different people and tell the students, this is what we've got. This is our schedule. We're not just the drunk fraternity anymore. We are the group that's bringing in speakers, or the group that is, focusing on mock trial, or the group that does community service, or that does all of it. And I think you will start to get people willing to join. And I think especially if you emphasize when you're in P.A.D, you help direct where it goes. Not even as an executive board member, but you can join committees and take it where you want it to go. And I think that way you'll have more students join, more students realize, oh, this reputation is no longer founded, and you kind of get yourself straight with the school and with the student body, and all of that. Do any of the other panelists want to chip in on that? Jennifer.
Yeah, I just want to add, I know you were saying that like the school puts you on a short leash. Invite the professors to your events. Ask them like, hey, do you want to come be at this event with like, because we had a lot of competitions, be like, do you want to judge the competition so that you can see firsthand how we're changing or how we're doing? Because you want to lead by example. I know we said that a lot in this. So you want to be the change that you want, like you want them to see you as something else. You be the change. You invite them to the events. And if it's like SBA, be like, hey, do you want to co-host this event with us? This is what we were thinking. What were you saying? So I think like opening the lines of communications with them and showing them firsthand like how much you've changed will actually really help with that too.
Thanks, Jennifer. Michelle, you made a really good point about initiation and how it is free for faculty to get initiated into Phi Alpha Delta. And so talk a little bit about that when we're going into spring initiations.
Yeah, so we found that was really cool as a way to get the chapter involved too. And we basically would say at the chapter meetings at the end of the fall semester, hey, if you have like a favorite professor, it was really popular with the 2L and 3L members also to kind of get them engaged. We would say, nominate them to join our fraternity, and we would kind of make our spring initiation where we would honor those faculty members. And then if maybe someone couldn't make fall initiation, then we could also initiate them in the spring. And the more active and present you are in the fall, it's like a great way when someone says, oh, I'm nervous, I don't want to overcommit myself, then you can follow up with those people and say, hey, do you want to join in the spring now? Talking about outline banks usually helped in the spring too, after they've gone through, like the 1Ls have gone through like their first round of finals. Having outlines to kind of help sometimes feels a little bit more important. But it was honoring the faculty members. We had one faculty member cry whenever we gave her our little invitation. The executive office can give you Phi Alpha Delta cards too, or at least we had some in our Phi Alpha Delta locker. And so that was really cool to write out a small handwritten note. You've been nominated to join our fraternity. This is what our fraternity stands for. This is why you were nominated. We would love to plan something. What are some dates that you're available? And then we would plan an initiation, and faculty members loved it. They felt really appreciated. And then we also honored our secretary in the main office of like the dean of students and everybody. She does like everything for the school. So even though she had not gone to law school, so she wasn't eligible to be initiated into the fraternity, we had the executive office print up a certificate of recognition and honored her at the initiation. And that was really popular. And she has it hanging in her office with the little fake red carnations that we give out too. So doing those things, you can get creative, and then it's a nice way to be present and have like a more formal event with the initiation as well in the spring.
Thanks, Michelle. And I think it also goes towards getting off of that short leash with with the school. If you get more faculty and staff who are P.A.D members, you're definitely going to get a longer leash, and they're going to work with you more. I think those are all of the questions I saw that we hadn't answered. If anyone has a question that they still would like to ask, please type it into the chat now or raise your hand before we end the session. Seeing no hands raised, seeing no people typing. All right. I'm going to volunteer all of the panelists and say that you please feel free to reach out to any of us at any time. We are happy to help. We are happy to give advice. We are happy to do anything that we can to help you out. And I think that's just one of the fundamental things that's awesome about P.A.D is that not only is there just 300,000 attorneys, but there's a lot of us that want to give back and want to do what we can for you guys. And so please, again, shamelessly exploit our willingness to provide assistance, and feel free to contact us. My understanding is that this will be or has been recorded. So if you want to share it with your chapter officers or anything like that, please feel free to do so. And at this time, I'm going to end by thanking Brother Hughes, Brother Irby, Sister Meloche, and Sister Sariol. They did a fantastic job. They have always contributed to P.A.D. especially while they're in law school, and even more so now. And so thank you so much for your participation on the panel. Thank you to everyone who showed up and watched this. I hope that it was beneficial to you. I hope you learned something and can take this back to your chapter to make it grow and make it better. And at this time, we will end this session. And I hope you all have a great day. You've got about 10 minutes to go grab some food, grab something to drink, or hit the restroom. Do whatever you got to do before the next general session. So I will see you all then. And until then, so long.